I was not exposed to Nancy Sullivan, woman, until she was with the Four Horsemen. And for me, when I was like, oh, her name is Woman, I thought it was just something that Ric Flair yelled at her. Like Ric Flair was such a douchebag that he didn't bother to know the name of this woman. He just like, woman, 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 come here, woman. Like he's Mr. T or something. So, like, the fact that they called her woman was a very odd thing that I thought was just a sexist example of Ric Flair. I thought that was all it was. When I first heard her name was Woman and she didn't have a name, I was like, oh, this is because Ric Flair's a douchebag and he doesn't want to know this woman's name. So that's what I thought when I first saw Nancy Sullivan. But then, of course, I know that's not the case. The Ric Flair being a douchebag, that's still the case. That never changed. It's actually, this might have been Exhibit A for me. I didn't even know.
Since she was called Woman because she really embodied being a woman, what would our ring names be based on that?
Sleepy for me.
Fuzzy for me. Like
Okay.
almost like, and not just because I have a mustache, but like fuzzy as in like mold is growing on me because my expiration date is way overdue.
I would say Lumber, both because of my last name and because of how I walk.
Yeah, you do seem like the type of guy like, oh, the diabetes is getting me, and I might be losing a foot. Like I feel like Tyler seems like the guy that's gonna take his sock off in the middle of a Bojangles to me one day, but like, look, you can't even see my toes no more. And he's gonna have those like scooters that he puts his knee on, and he's just rolling around. Like I feel like that's Tyler.
Jake, first of all, you shouldn't talk about our fan base that way. And second of all, I assume it's one of those tan socks that goes up to about my thigh and it's compressed all to hell. Is that right?
That is correct. And
Okay.
third of all, how's that Mountain Dew tasting?
Oh, delicious. Delicious. I mix it with I cut it with some mellow yellow sometimes just to keep myself on my toes while I still have my toes.
Put a little Sierra Mist in there to give it a little effervescence, if you will. That is the Eastern Carolina gentleman cocktail, if you will.
Oh, I do agree.
It is the equivalent of a Kentucky mint julep.
Hello, this is Tim Bellpod. I'm Nick Alexander, joined by soon-to-be sit-down comic Tyler Wood.
Hello.
And we are joined, as always, by Northeast Wrestling Hall of Famer, the Man Scout Jake Banning.
Yep, that's continually always going to be our intro. No need to do any others. Sit-down comic Tyler Wood and Mo Alexander. Those two gentlemen. That is a North Carolina headliner deep cut. National also a little bit too, but definitely if you're in North Carolina, you know who Mo Alexander is. But don't worry, you'll be seeing the white version of Mo Alexander at the Greensboro Comedy Zone very soon in Tyler Wood.
All right, so today we are continuing our coverage on the Benoits by doing something that not a lot of people who broach this topic do, and that's remember that Nancy was an actual fucking person. Nancy has, unfortunately become just, the woman that Chris murdered to so many people, despite making significant contributions to wrestling for decades. But to bring up Nancy and to honor her is to bring up Chris and, the whole thing, which makes some people, especially WWE, feel icky. So for no other reason other than her husband killing her, Nancy has, by default, also gotten the Chris Benoit treatment, and that's bullshit.
Yeah, and you look at wrestling valets over the years, she was one of the best. She was the thing that completed Kevin Sullivan's act in Florida. She was the thing that brought an edge to Sandman. I jokingly brought up about her managing the Four Horsemen. I mean, I felt like she had a lot more going on than Liz and Deborah. She was the thing that she added an edge to the Horsemen during an era of the Horsemen where they were looking for an edge. I mean, Mongo was kind of carrying the load, of course, of being the edge of that era, the Four Horsemen. But regardless, there was a sinisterness to it. that I always really enjoyed, especially when women would be, seconding Arn Anderson. Like, felt like a very dangerous combination. So it is regrettable, I should say, that history forgets her, because then you have to bring up Chris. But I feel like the Dark Side of the Ring did a very good job of mentioning her and discussing her career, but we're going to get a bit more in depth than that even here today. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, she had a much longer career than many women of the time, especially ones that weren't wrestlers. To see it stretch across, Florida, ECW, WCW, it's going to be fun to take a dive in.
And it's hard to find Nancy's career. There are even like conflicting dates on her birthday and birthplace and like official sources. Part of that is WWE suppression. Part of it's because a chunk of it was in the territory days. Part is because woman as a name isn't the best SEO strategy. Like, I get why most Nancy coverage is Florida, ECW, Chris Benoit, done. But that's just not the reality. Two big sources for this episode outside of the books I named in part one. Jim Dowse, Nancy's first husband, who did a interview with Monty and the Pharaoh, a YouTube podcast kind of thing. There's also a different transcribed interview with Ring the Damn Bell, accompanied by some really good pictures of Nancy. And then there's Nancy's sister, Sandra Toffoloni. You can hear a full interview on Chris Jericho's podcast, number 259. Not only was she Nancy's sister, she was very close to Daniel and Chris. But Sandra has a very interesting view on all of this because she was so close to the family. And she's like able to have all these warm, happy, funny memories of obviously Nancy and her nephew Daniel, but also Chris, which at the same time having so many super negative and complicated feelings about him. And I think that's like such a good summary of talking about this at all. Obviously way more intense for her. But if she can conjure up some good things to say about Chris, I think I feel a little better about us going, yeah, that match was pretty good or whatever.
No, Nick, I'm going to let you be the only one to endorse a murderer here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's your job. That you go ahead and do that. It's still weird when I see pictures of Chris Benoit like taking pictures with kids and on a WWE DVD. It's like, ooh, like this is chilling. I do remember it, but it's a very complicated past. So yes, I'm looking forward to us discussing Nancy and being about Nancy and be like, yeah, what she did there was great, and it not feel problematic.
All right, we kick this off with Jake, I guess, introduction to woman and or Nancy. But Tyler, representing the newer school fans, what was the first thing you saw of Nancy Benoit Sullivan woman?
First time I really heard about Nancy Benoit, unfortunately, was the tribute Raw that, that one. But I've been able to go back through, and over time just doing some research or seeing things here and there. I think the biggest thing that stood out to me was probably the Tommy Dreamer Kane match with Sandman, and just how infuriating she was as a manager as he's sitting there like waiting to be caned, and she's just like, oh wait, you can just make this stop, Dreamer, you can make this stop. And I was like, oh man, she's playing this perfectly. That's amazing. I'm surprised I'm getting this frustrated by something that happened before I was born.
I think for me, it's just because this moment in general is so like burned into my mind. But when the NWO attack on WCW, where Kevin Nash like darts Rey Mysterio into the trailer, yada yada, her like kind of selling of the situation, that's like really seared in my mind. She did like such a good job making it seem so real.
You're 1,000%, because when I was talking about her teaming, seconding Arn, that was the first thing I thought of was Arn holding his arm and her screaming out for help. Like, I think that was probably the thing when I watched it that made it feel real.
Mm-hmm.
Was women's reactions to it, like that whole lawn darting Rey Mysterio into the truck. Like, it's almost comical, and it is kind of pro wrestling-esque. And to me, woman's reaction was kind of the thing that blurred the lines for me, because like I was like, man, she's really upset. Yeah. Like, that was the thing that made me believe that was like, oh, maybe that was real. I mean, everything else they did didn't convey that, but like that was the thing that got me and hooked me.
Nancy Elizabeth Toffoloni was born May 17th, 1964 in Boston, Massachusetts, to parents Paul and Maureen.
Are you from Boston? I'm from Boston. You live in Florida now? My name's Kevin. What do you think about the devil? If that was not Kevin Sullivan's first line to her, I don't know what it was. Like, you're from Boston? Oh, we got to talk about Boston. We talk about crab cakes. We'll talk all kinds of the North Shore, all that stuff.
I know he didn't commit any crimes in this, but after listening to an interview with him talking about Nancy, just that accent is like, can we just put him in jail for that alone? Can we do that?
We'll get there. There's opinions I have about this, so let's continue on. We're not there yet.
Beep boop, robot noises. Beep boop. Hello everyone, this is the not AI 100% actual person Tyler Wood. Beep boop, aka the Swansboro Shitler. I don't know who Robert Gibson is, just kind of a PSA on this episode. Sadly, as we were recording, editing, making this episode, Kevin Sullivan and Sid passed away. There are going to be 2 people involved in this story. Beep boop, beep boop. So keep that in mind, especially as we make endless Boston jokes. I will self-destruct in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But we'll be there shortly, because it's how she gets into wrestling.
Yeah. So Nancy would also later be joined by the previously mentioned 10-year younger sister, Sandra. The family would move to the greater Daytona Beach-ish area, Deland, Florida, where Nancy attended Deland High School. And it was there that she met her first husband, the also previously mentioned Jim Dowse.
I'm sorry, Nick, you said the greater part of Daytona Beach. Where's the great part of it?
Okay. The fucking ocean.
The racetracks?
The Buc-ee's they put up there, like, so we're still for a few years away from it being greater because I haven't put in a Buc-ee's yet, Nicholas, okay?
Jim, who was about a year older than Nancy, met her on his last day of his senior year. Nancy was a junior heading into her senior year. She was hanging out with some friends. She needed a ride home. Jim took her. They became friends, eventually went on a date. They were married about a year later, putting us around 1982. Jim was a meter reader for a gas company, or as Kevin Sullivan would say, meter reader!
Never. Let's make this a trend throughout the show. Please, for the love of God.
Oh, man.
So Nancy was answering phones for an insurance company. So these are just some very normal-ass beginnings to a normal-ass life. But under Jim's common man persona laid a darkness. He was a pro wrestling fan. Well, Nancy was not. She came with him to Florida Championship Wrestling, where the two became regulars. It's, Spencer, she'll come to a show with me. She'll watch WrestleMania once a year, but she's not like digging through all Japan footage or anything. It's kind of that level.
Well, this should be a cautionary tale, Nick, don't bring her to too many shows.
Especially like hearing all the stories of how she got into wrestling. We're almost there. Keep going, Nick, because there's things to discuss.
Does she have a soft spot for fat, ugly Bostonians?
Of course she does. One's that got a trading card signed by Carlton Fisk. He's a wave right.
Jim and Nancy tended to go see shows on Sunday night in Orlando at the Eddie Graham Sports Center. And if you're pitching pro wrestling to someone, taking them to see Prime Dusty Rhodes is probably a good call.
At a fucking armory. All right? Like, let's not call it the Eddie Graham. It's a fucking armory. It's probably 1,000,000 fucking degrees in Florida. Like, you could probably cook an egg on the floor with all the people in there. I highly doubt there's air conditioning in there. They probably just open up the rolling doors and hope an alligator doesn't wander in. Like, that's how I feel like territory wrestling was in Florida.
Well, I think it's fair to say in a 1982 armory with a bunch of professional wrestlers, that alligator wouldn't be the only predator around. Nick?
Continue.
All right, so how does Nancy go from just a normal-ass person to pro wrestling carny? In 83, while in the crowd, Nancy caught the eye of pro wrestling photographer Bill Otten. Now, if we all know one thing about 80s pro wrestling photographers, they're straight up pussy hounds. So Bill...
They're just like photographers now that say, I have a camera, would you like me to take pictures of you, pretty girl?
So Bill was able to talk Nancy into doing some modeling, which is a crazy story all by itself. So Jim and Nancy were sitting in the front row when Terry Funk walked over, took Jim's chair, and threw it in the ring. Bill, the photographer, he took a picture of this, and that landed as a centerfold in a Japanese wrestling magazine. And I assume people were like, damn, who's shawty? Because Bill wanted to take some more pictures of Nancy. Jim and Nancy became friends with Bill, and just like that, path was set.
It even caused a stir in the locker room from what I always heard about Nancy Sullivan is that, you know, she'd gone to a couple shows, and of course all fucking 80s pro wrestlers, guys, I wouldn't leave an 80s territory wrestler alone with a submarine sandwich. Like, they'll probably fuck it. Or snort it. I don't know. They're terrible human beings.
I don't remember this having ranch dressing.
I mean, an attractive woman in the front row, all of the guys in the locker room like, who's going after her? Who's going to get her? We're going to find a way to get her, as if she's a prize, a thing. I mean, not that 80s pro wrestlers were immune to it. It even happened in the early 2000s and 2010s. Some guys, that's wrestling and fucking are all the things they cared about. And for somebody who was as attractive as Nancy was at her very early young age, that I guess a lot of guys were trying to figure out who is going to be the first to get to her. Who's going to be, like, as if she's some prize to be won. So this poor woman just coming to see some pro wrestling because the person she's dating likes pro wrestling, and then you end up having a career in it. I hope you enjoyed it. It seems like she did. She was great at it. So if I found something that I was great at because, you know, people wanted to have sex with me, then yeah, I'd probably want to do that for a while. I don't know what that would be for me, but like, it definitely caught a lot of people's eyes. Predator's eyes, yes, but at the same time too, of all the guys that ended up with her in the locker room, it being Kevin Sullivan, might not, probably long term, probably your best option, to be really quite honest.
Also, what percentage of pro wrestling fans do you think, if a wrestler wanted to fuck their girlfriend, they'd be like, oh, yes.
40.
More than what you think.
No,
More than what you think.
I disagree.
More than what you think.
I think it's a good... I think we're close to the same number, which is more than it should be.
Yeah, more. Trust me, there's been many of fan fests and conventions that I've been to, and guys have their attractive wives with them, and I just know if Johnny Swinger wanted to go to Pound Town with somebody's wife, the guy would let him.
Also, before we get away from it, Nick, you said that she was the picture was a centerfold in a Japanese pro wrestling magazine, and they said, "Damn, who's shawty?" Can you give like an accurate representation of what the Japanese fans would be saying there?
No, I can't.
Would you like to try?
No.
Yeah, I know you can't, but would you like to try?
We have to get through the end of this series, and if I do it, that would be the last episode. So.
Okay, all right. Just want to make sure.
After about 3 or 4 months of palling around and doing some photo shoots with Bill, Nancy and Jim were getting to naturally know some of the wrestlers, including a Billy Jack Haynes, who you can find Nancy on the cover of a magazine with. Then the duo met Kevin Sullivan.
Ruh-roh.
And I'm sure Kevin thought she was hot or whatever, but up front, maybe his intentions were pure. Because they all became good friends. Like Kevin and Jim, they were friends. And even after everything that happens, Kevin and Jim like stayed in touch through the years.
Kevin seems like the little bit that I've been around Kevin in my life, sweetheart of a man. And everybody seems to have pretty good things to say about him. Seems like they were together for a very long time. And it got really shitty towards the end. And I'm sure the resentment that came up between Kevin and Chris came up to the fact of Nancy and all the things that were involved with that, but we don't know everything that happened with that, so I don't know what happened with the end, but it seems like for the majority of it, it was okay.
Yeah, Kevin said on a shoot interview he's not racist, so sounds like a good guy.
Did he start naming off all his black friends? Because that's
Teddy
the only way
Long.
to really yeah, dude.
He said, I even heard some of the higher up guys say, why are you hanging out with that N? And they said the N word.
I wouldn't dare say that. I'm from Boston. I mean, I like Booker T as much as the next guy. Should he be world champion? Yeah, in good time. I mean, 2040 seems like a good time for that.
The N-word is Boston's city motto.
It's just in Latin around the seal.
So there is that narrative that Kevin swooped in and wooed her away with the sultry sounds of his Boston accent. But it's not entirely the case for the most part. But Nancy did end up doing a shoot, again for a Japanese magazine, that was basically the rough draft of Fallen Angel, which would be Nancy's first character in the business. That photo shoot is when the gears start turning for Kevin, for Nancy, for everyone involved, and she would soon become a pro wrestling valet. You can find Nancy's pro wrestling debut July 11th, 1984, on an episode of Championship Wrestling from Florida, taped just 4 days prior. She comes down to the ring with Kevin's posse of druids, snakes, Sir Oliver Humperdinck, and Nancy is chained to Kevin's side. Sullivan squashes Jerry Gray. 1 rep in, Nancy was officially a pro wrestling personality.
And like a scantily clad woman dressed in this manner, it kind of feels like a comic strip from Heavy Metal has come to life. Like, I think if it's just Kevin with his cast of characters, as good as they all were, the Mark Lewin, Sir Oliver Humperdinck, I'm forgetting the one guy who shaved half his face. Regardless, it could have got a little weird and wonky, but I think Nancy had such a look about her that it added an edge to it. Like, she doesn't get the credit she deserves for adding an edge to just about everything. I think without her ending up with Kevin's whole satanic thing could probably seen as one of the really hokey things in professional wrestling, but I think she kind of completed the package and gave it an edge that gave it a realistic feel, gave it something extra, gave it a bit of sex appeal, a bit of sharpness to it. Like I said, you look at pictures with Nancy and Kevin, like on the beach, it's like a comic strip from Heavy Metal come to life, and like there's a particular artist that does a lot of art that's very similar to that, and that's kind of what they had in real life. So yeah, I think Kevin owes a tremendous amount for Nancy giving a sharpness to the whole devil gimmick that wouldn't have existed without her.
He owes a tremendous amount to her just for looking at him naked ever. Like that, man. Jesus.
It ain't no big green monster, I'll tell you that much.
Actually, that's a good example of how Kevin Sullivan is living the gimmick. That is the only way he could get with a woman like Nancy. To be worshiping the devil and making some sacrifices.
And yeah, to get into that whole gimmick, like to say that Kevin and Nancy and the stable were over as these mean Devil Hills is like an understatement. They were like top tier territory bad guys in one of the biggest territories in pro wrestling history. This is also peak satanic panic, one of the embarrassing eras of our country where people riled up various common rural folk to get money out of them, an American tradition. But all this like devil talk, it's very much in the zeitgeist. You're also in the South. Although the devil gimmick always seemed kind of funny to me. Like, hey, the dudes that always hang out with Lucifer, Baphomet, Beelzebub, Kevin.
I gotta get a winter lager. And I also gotta worship the devil.
We call upon the spirits.
Your cousin from Boston, who's a devil worshiper. But it's really nice. You take the parking spot. No, I insist. Haburadin insists. By the order of the occult, I order you to take the parking spot.
So as I mentioned, Jim and Nancy were just normal people, not really creatives, not someone trying to like make it in wrestling, muggles as we call them. But she did have experience performing. She won like several bikini contests all over the state of Florida. a Miss Hawaiian Tropic, Miss JJ Whispers. I don't know what that is. So she's not like terrified of being in front of a crowd. She also did some apartment wrestling, which is basically like posed wrestling holds, not wearing a lot of clothes. Tyler, this is if you had to print out OnlyFans.
Ah, I see.
Also, too, Tyler, apartment wrestling is kind of like OnlyFans, but Bill Apter's involved. So,
Ooh, now I'm in.
no, I bet, yes.
Do I get to rub his bald fucking head?
While he does a Dusty Rhodes impersonation, of course you can.
Beautiful,
yes,
beautiful. That's very much worth $5.99 a month.
But Jim, he was taking Nancy to all of these photo shoots. Now he's adding live shows. But, he still has like a day job and shit. Nancy was making, all of $75 a gig. Not horrible, I guess, for the 80s. But, they still had like real life to worry about. But it was becoming very evident that Nancy was a star, and her life in wrestling kind of drove a wedge in their marriage for no other reason than now she's like a road dog. And this isn't what Jim signed up for. I don't know if Jim was like looking back on all this with like rose-colored glasses, but he said that he chose to step aside, let her go do her thing, and the two soon divorced in 1985.
Well, she probably expressed interest that she's like, hey, what we're doing is cool, and was probably more focused on like, what am I going to do with Kevin? How are we going to do this act? What outfit should I wear? What are we going to do in this promo? Like, she's probably pretty focused on it, and Jim's like, yeah, that's cool, but I got to go read meters in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, probably too, like Kevin's probably talking about like, oh, once we finish up in Florida, we'll maybe we'll go through Texas. Maybe we'll do a loop in Japan and then maybe stop off in Hawaii and wrestle for a little while. Like, he's probably talking about other territories, and Nancy's probably like, man, I'd really like to go to some of those places where Jim has probably only known Florida wrestling and thought, oh, well, Florida wrestling's cool and that I like this wrestling. I don't care about all the other wrestling that's in the world. Just Florida wrestling's all I care about. It's all I've been exposed to. And probably doesn't even know there's other wrestling out there. And this idea that people will do an act for 3 months in a territory, then pack up and move on and go to another territory, do the same act over there, and just kind of travel across the country as these weird carnies. He's just thinks, oh yeah, she'll just wrestle in Florida and manage in Florida forever, and not realizing like, oh, there's a much bigger world to this.
So again, there's no like big cheating scandal or anything, but Jim did say towards the end he was a little suspicious. I think once she started touring with Kevin all by herself, it got a little weird. But in the end, it doesn't fucking matter. They got a divorce.
In the end, it doesn't even matter.
So Jim kept up with Nancy on and off through the years, but here's where he like mostly checks out of the story. He's been married for 30 years, normal guy. He did run a business running nationwide bad man fighting contests, so kind of a carny in his own right, but So Nancy is now free to work full-time in pro wrestling, and obviously her career took off. She was also now legally single. Nancy was still touring with Kevin. One thing leads to another. They do get involved. They dated for a while and eventually married. Their marriage date is all over the place, I think because kayfabe really like throws a wrench in there, but it seems like the true marriage came 1992. Don't quote me on it. It was like really hard to find.
The only date that truly matters is the one that Satan recognizes.
Amen.
Well, trust me, when it comes to dealing with legal paperwork, which I have all day, kayfabe really gets in the way. Really kind of gets in the way of legal documents, so really kind of annoying.
Yeah, how is your green card marriage going, by the way?
She's already had a green card marriage. Apparently this is for love, but nobody's told me about it. So I'm the last to know that this is a marriage based on love.
So we'll get into sort of Kevin Sullivan's like less cool parts later, but wrestling-wise, I think we all think of him as that like pop belly devil dude who like waddled around WCW. But in the 80s, he was like in really good shape. He could talk his fucking ass off. He was solid enough for like the era. Was he going to burn it down with Tiger Mask? Probably not. But, he was fine. But he was a master in character work, ring psychology. Arguably, more importantly, he knew how to play the chess game of backstage politics. He like excelled at it. And by his side in a starring role, soaking up all this in-ring knowledge, character work knowledge, backstage politics strategy was Nancy. And Nancy was a very sharp, smart woman who came to have a deep understanding of the pro wrestling business. And that is business in the ring and business behind the curtain.
And like how to navigate this whole tricky, dangerous world of professional wrestling. I remember when we did a shoot interview with Deborah, she talked about like one of the first times she met Nancy, and they were about ready to go out and valet for Rick at Universal Studios. And Nancy was just standing there in Gorilla. All of a sudden, she just kind of reached in her mouth and like pulled out a razor blade. And Deborah's like, "What? Why do you have a razor blade?" And Nancy's like, "You never know when these fans are going to get too close. You got to cut them just in case." And then tucked it back in her mouth like it's a piece of dip. Keep in mind, this isn't like a show in Mexico. This isn't the ECW arena. This is Universal Studios in Florida. There's a family of 5 from Toledo, Ohio in the front row, and Nancy's about ready to cut a motherfucker if they lay a finger on him. Like, we just got done talking about this innocent girl who husband was a meter reader, and then and by the time we get to this end of this story, she's carrying razor blades around her knife for protection. And this part of the story we're at right now is where she learns all that crazy stuff.
She was made for this business, like fish to water. That's
yes.
Yeah.
She took right to it.
Nancy I don't think she ever got like any sort of formal training like as a pro wrestler, but she does have 3 matches. The first being in this time period in '85 when she took on Debbie Combs in an Anything Goes street fight for NWA Polynesia. You can find it on YouTube. A lot of rolling around, hair pulling, very much the style of the time. But then Kevin Sullivan flies in and just fucking decks Debbie. Like, it's very unexpected and very aggressive.
Well, to be fair, Nicholas, in our timeline outline, it says Debbie Cologne. So I've been waiting for you to talk about this because it feels like it's Carlos Colon in a wig, which would have made more sense for Kevin Sullivan to come running out like, "I knew it was you, Carlos Colon. It wasn't Debbie Cologne. You tricked me a little bit, but now I'm here." So it is a hysterical match, but it's clearly like Nancy doesn't know how to bump. She is just willingly get her hair pulled around by Debbie Combs. But if you notice, since Nancy doesn't know a lot, Debbie Combs, being the true pro that she is, never lets Nancy get out of arm's reach of her, which is a very important thing. If you're in there with like a green girl or a green boy or whoever, you got to make sure that you're within arm's reach of them at all times. So if you need to communicate with them, put them in the spots you need to, don't let them get distance away from you, because that's where bad things happen. Debbie does a fantastic job of that. So if you guys do find that match, that is a masterclass on how you keep somebody close.
So yeah, this was the shtick. They toured around the country, boogieing people with their devil magic, and it was extremely successful. But while they were cosplaying the devil, Satan himself, Vince McMahon, was gobbling up the pro wrestling world, and that directly affected Kevin and Nancy. Florida was eventually absorbed by Crockett in '87, which basically everything that was at Memphis, Portland, AWA was absorbed into NWA, then became WCW. This put Kevin and Nancy in danger of losing their jobs because Jim Crockett was a Southern Baptist who had reservations about, Satan.
And it's funny because this is what like Dusty kind of took over the book too. So like Dusty made a ton of money with Kevin Sullivan, so he could have just done that whole thing, but on Turner. But like obviously putting that in a national audience could have been problematic at the time. I mean, that's definitely a regional territory thing. But I mean, not even Dusty could be like, get the devil on TV. Like, and I'm sure in Dusty's mind, he's like, "Listen, baby, I would love to be a salesman for you. I would love to sell to all the wonderful Baptist people. I know Jim Baker, he in Charlotte, North Carolina. I know Jimmy Swaggart, he in Charlotte, North Carolina. You were the devil, Kevin. I can't put the devil in the same airport as Jimmy Swaggart. I just can't do it, baby. I can't do it. I'm a hell of a salesman. I'd love to do it for you, baby, but I just can't do it for you, baby. I could put in a good word for you with the Funks down there. I could put a good word for you up with Vern. I can send you wherever you want to go, baby. But Charlotte, North Carolina, right now, with the Praise the Lord Network, I just can't do it for you, baby. I just can't do it for you. I'm sorry."
Nancy, she ended up being pretty close friends with Jim Barnett, and that saved both their jobs.
I bet she was good friends. Jim Barnett was like, oh honey, I wish I could wear outfits like you, darling. I love what you've got going on. Oh, this is wonderful. You've got which is a weird take on a Jim Barnett impersonation, but I feel like it's applicable.
Kevin was not only brought in as a wrestler, he was promoted to assistant booker, not the head booker. This should be around, the Dusty, the Flares, the what do they call it, committee, the dog who noses the ball down the stairs, and whichever bucket it lands in, that's who wins. That's this era of WCW booking. So there's a little stretch here where I don't know what the fuck Nancy was doing. Kevin was in Mid-Atlantic, Crockett, whatever, and he went on that ride to where it became WCW. Did you see a lot of her valeting for Kevin in, Crockett?
Not really. I think this is where we go from Kevin. Since Kevin can't really do the devil thing, this is where we get Varsity Club Kevin, and we start getting Robin Green and everything.
Yeah, that's about
Rick Steiner Association. So obviously, Kevin found his way in to Crockett as the Varsity Club, which was always weird, and it was even weirder when they brought it back in late 90s. So it felt like it was more tailored for Rick Steiner than anybody else, and maybe Dr. Death, but Kevin Sullivan a part of the Varsity Club, just weird.
Nancy does show up in WCW summer of '89, appearing as a fan of Rick Steiner, which we touched on all this from the Butch Reed episode. It's all part of Doom. Going by Robin Green, wearing Steiner t-shirt and large glasses. She would sit in the audience and, try to interact with the dog face gremlin. It's very much that scene from Not Another Teen Movie where he's like,
she's got glasses and a ponytail.
And it's also very Kevin was probably look, remember when you were sweet and innocent when I first met you? I need you to be that again here. And then fuck him over real good. That's what I need.
And then she spits the razor blade out of her mouth. She's like, you got it, Kevin.
Nancy, as Robin, would end up going on a date with Rick Steiner as he was hyped up by good old JR. You can see this on the August 26, 89 edition of WCW Saturday Night. And this is where nerdy Robin Green turns into super hot sex woman. Not quite woman yet, but she's the character woman basically at this point. Her exposure to the wrestling world so far was, basically hot girl in wrestling magazines. She was in the satanic cult stable. But in this angle, this was really the first time Nancy was front and center. She was doing mic work, film segments, and, she was good. Was she the Rock or Bobby Heenan on the mic? Probably not, but she had this kind of driving, methodical, interesting cadence that made you listen, helped that she was attractive. But yeah, she's holding her own on TV. This is not tucked away. This is on TBS every week. And then, as that build was happening, you get to see her do a segment with Scott Steiner, where she pulls up in a limo. They drag him in to get beat up by who turns out to be Doom. And then it's September 30th, 89, where there's a promo of Nancy stating that she is not Robin Green. She is not a valet. She is not a manager. She is woman. And she is taking over with the new woman organization of wrestling, brother. Just so think of woman as the evil twin of Miss Elizabeth. Liz was the Disney princess, and as we have stated, woman would cut you in the parking lot. She goes on to manage Doom throughout their debut at 89's Havoc. We really kind of got into all of the actual Doom part in Butch's episode, but anything you guys kind of want to circle back on or talk about as far as Nancy's involvement?
Well, I think this was kind of the beginning, we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, the edge that she added, the Four Horsemen, the edge she added, the Sandman. I think this is kind of the beginning of that. Mm-hmm. This is where she learns how to be edgy, but wearing an evening gown. Where it's pretty easy to be edgy when you're wearing a bikini top and your eyes are all blacked out and you're wearing chains. That screams edge, but having an edge to yourself while wearing an evening gown, and have an element of danger to you a little bit too. There's a sense of I feel like this is a badass woman just by looking at her. That is something I don't know if you can really teach. If it's something you learn, well, this is where Nancy learned it.
Following Doom, she heads to work with the Four Horsemen. It was kind of this angle where she was trying to buy the Horsemen. Wait about 10 years and Rick will sell you anything. And then per the 90s, WCW's spin the bottle booking strategy, Kevin was eventually out of power, and Nancy and Kevin would be out of the company by summer of 91.
What? That's the sound of a rattlesnake in your earbuds. That's right, if you didn't want the stone cold Steve Austin experience, you need to shut them earbuds off right now. As a matter of fact, why don't you just take them ears and rip them off? Because if you don't want stone cold talking to you, then you don't deserve ears. Can I get a hell yeah? I'm gonna go ahead and assume you said it. I'm here today because I want to tell you about my friends over at 10 Bell Pod. 10 Bell Pod. Tyler Wood, Nick Alexander, and Jake, the Man Scout Man, and bringing you some of the best wrestling content on the internet. Now can I get a hell yeah? While you're giving me a hell yeah, why don't you go ahead and pop over to their Patreon. Go ahead and give a subscription. Then why don't you hop your fat little ass right over to Pro Wrestling Tees and get a 10 Bell Pod exclusive t-shirt featuring all three of these beautiful men. You might be saying, what? What? Stone Cold, you think these men are beautiful? God damn it, I do. Now you get over there and you buy that t-shirt before I stomp a mud hole in you and walk it dry. Now let me get a hell yeah.
So they're off in the Indies. They went to International Championship Wrestling. She did some mic work there for sure. Obviously, this is the Northeast one, not the Paphos. I know at least Kevin went to FMW and Wing in Japan in 92. It's like hard enough to find his matches, much less, stuff with Nancy.
You can find me smashing somebody's balls with a monkey wrench in Japan. You can definitely find a clip of that.
Kevin does a big run in Smoky Mountain in 92 into 93. They really set up the Evil Stable angle. Like all the groundwork was laid for Fallen Angel. But she never showed up from Smoky Mountain from what I saw. Jake, do you recall?
I mean, look, Kevin comes home and be like, hey, you want to go to Grundy, West Virginia? Like, how do you fucking sell that? Hey, do you want to go to Welch, West Virginia? Come on, babe, let's get in the car.
Hey, I know you're just on TV. You want to find out what a spit cup is?
Hey, you want to come to Abington, Virginia? Like, that sounds like fun, right? Come on. Newton, North Carolina? We're at the community center. Come on. It's good. They got marble floors in the lobby, not in the basketball floor. And we're just below. There's a whole... Come on, babe. Newton, North Carolina. It's great.
Yeah, they have pig pickings. It's where they fuck a pig and then eat it afterwards.
Jim says he might branch out into South Carolina. We might be going to Pickens.
A place where Nancy would for sure show up would be ECW. September 93... By December 93, she had managed him and Tasmaniac to the ECW Tag Team Championship. They held the titles until March of 94 when they were beaten by Public Enemy, who you heard about that on our Public Enemy episode. After dropping the belts, Kevin goes back to WCW, but Nancy stays to work in ECW.
Dude, Kevin and Taz in a tag team, can you imagine the fucking promos? Oh my god. Talking about Kevin's accent earlier, those two doing battle on the...
Pretending to be something else when you have the thickest accent in the world. Also, too, the short man complex between those two. But also, too, back to trashing West Virginia. So Nancy was like heard about going to like Grundy, West Virginia, and was like, absolutely not. Like, well, what about the ECW arena? All right, okay, yeah, I can wrap my head around that. Like, that's how bad West Virginia is. That going to the corner of Swanson and Ritter sounds like a great idea.
So Nancy in ECW. She is a pretty underrated figure in all of pro wrestling, but I think it hits like criminal levels at ECW. She not only managed Sandman and Two Colt Scorpio, but she was like a key part of not just their development, but the entire roster and the whole Fed's development. Like, how many guys in ECW at this point had ever been in an angle half as successful as her in Florida? How many of them had been part of TV production, like the size of WCW? So Nancy is kind of like a player coach here in ECW as the company grew.
And you could definitely see it when she's out there with Sandman and like other people that hadn't attained that level yet in their career, because when she walked through the curtain, she was like looking dead into that camera, where Sandman's looking out in the crowd and doing all kinds of stuff, and other people she managed, they were doing all kinds of things, but like she could look like dead in the camera and just like add a level of intimacy to her segment on the show that like you felt like you were there because of the way that she was looking through the lens of the camera. Like it is piercing, it is noticeable. It makes her look super professional in the midst of everything that is not professional and chaos and out of the ordinary. And it makes everything around her that is not professional very noticeable, and it makes her, what she's trying to do on a level, very noticeable.
As much as Nancy would, I guess, step up in the level of which she was featured in WCW, she's like a star in ECW. First big run, she pairs up with Sandman as part of his feud with his old wife, Peaches. Teaming along with him, she'd light his cigarettes, hand him a beer. She carried the cane and hit people with it.
I do have something, you sparked something with that thought. I don't want to give it all away because I am saving some stuff for, the big moment with Kevin Sullivan. But he did have some kind words to say about Nancy's womanly charms and how sexy she looked lighting up Sandman's cigarette and the implications that, people would light up cigarettes after having sex. So Kevin was very much into what she was doing with Sandman in ECW.
That's good, I guess. It would also be ECW where Woman had the last two of her 3 matches at When Worlds Collide, the ECW version. May 14, 94, Woman and Sandman lost to Carrillo and Peaches in a Singapore cane match after Peaches caned the Sandman in his dick.
The payoff to the Dreamer feud, which I think Tommy Dreamer credits this moment with kind of making his career.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's 1000% the thing that makes him.
Dude, Tommy Dreamer had the best tits in the ring that night. They were really popping off through those suspenders. But he...
And his dick would agree because it was in that weird singlet that was like, you could see his penis outline and everything in there.
It had everything, and anything you could ask for.
Dick, balls, the woman seductively talking to him.
Yeah,
while he was getting his ass beat.
It was a very intimate sounding thing where she's like, "You like this, Tommy? You like this?" And like, there were some fetishes unlocked that night. I feel like with her constantly taunting him through the 10 lashings that he took, and dude, his back got lit up from that. But she was the glue of the whole segment of like hyping up each hit as it went. And him basically telling her, "Fuck you, I'm not gonna kiss your feet. Have him hit me again."
Yeah, I feel like the whole Sandman-woman combination would be a meme today. If it first came out, it'd be like that meme of like, their kinks match each other. I feel like that's kind of what they would have done. But yeah,
it's called Rhea and Dom Mysterio.
Yeah, pretty much. But no, like, woman definitely adds an edge to the whole thing because Sandman's not going to articulate that. He's just the guy swinging the cane.
Can't speak.
So, he can't speak. If you did, like, he sounds like a South Philly accent. There's so many accents in this one. Right? Like, there's so many fucking accents in this one. I'm trying to be respectful to my neighbors on the other side of my apartment here, and I don't want to be screaming like a Brooklyn accent. I don't want to be screaming a Boston accent and a South Philadelphia accent. They're gonna think I'm having a psychotic break over here.
Woman was there for Sandman when he beat Shane Douglas for the ECW title. She would be there for the end of Sandman's title reign, October 28th, when he lost to Mikey Whipwreck in a ladder match after stunning Steve Austin, prevented Woman from interfering. So there's a nice little cross-section. February 95 at Big Apple Blizzard Blast, Woman announced that she was returning to WCW's, parting ways with the Sandman and Too Cold Scorpio. While Nancy was in ECW, Kevin had earned the trust of both Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff, eventually becoming head booker. He'd bring Nancy back to WCW. She made her return on January 22nd, 1996, Nitro, as part of Macho Man's entourage of ladies. It's obvious they're going to do something with her because she's getting called out on commentary. Later, she slaps Ric Flair down by the ring. And this is the Nitro where Macho Man beat Ric Flair for the title. That's all this. She's there. February 5th episode of Nitro, which isn't on the network for some fucking asshole reason, but you can find it on Daily Motion. Nancy turns on Macho Man during his match with Chris Benoit. They have nothing to do with each other yet, but it's just, kind of crazy. This is when she joins the Four Horsemen, mostly to valet for Flair.
I like how you were like, I don't know why this isn't on the WWE Network. So Chris Benoit is here.
Other shit is.
I have no idea why they would earthly think to not include this. So Nancy's here with Chris Benoit.
And just to set up next episode, I wanted to sort of zoom out and paint the picture. The Dungeon of Doom was created by Taskmaster, Kevin Sullivan. So it's kind of a play to his Florida days, and that's stable. But this is mostly a device to feed Hulk Hogan monsters. You have John Tenta, you have Kamala, Vader. This started roughly May of 95 and continues into 96. The dungeon eventually leaks up with the Four Horsemen to form the alliance to end Hulkamania. That's how we get to the Doomsday Cage and the factions kind of beefing with each other. The original issue is a riff between Kevin Sullivan and Brian Pillman, and that goes back as early as January of 96, where the two kind of scrapped on Nitro January 29th. So as Nancy managed Flair against Randy Super Brawl 6, the same pay-per-view, Kevin took on Brian Pillman in the Mr. Bookerman I Respect You match. Brian was then fired, whether it be kayfabe or for real or fucking loose cannon, whatever.
Makes a difference. It's not his episode.
Yeah.
You figured that out. We're not going to debate whether or not that was real or not. All we know that was listen to our episode of Brian Pillman. You decide. Moving on.
But either way, he's gone, and Kevin Sullivan moves on to feud with Chris Benoit.
Ruh-roh.
And that is where we will pick back up on next episode.
So what we're saying is Brian Pillman's to blame here. He's the catalyst for all of this, all these roads leading out here, because Kevin got a taste of I get a feud that's very realistic and cutting edge. I'd like to do that same thing. I got to push the envelope, and I don't bump the way I used to anymore, but boy, can I smash somebody's nuts with a monkey wrench. That's for sure. That's what I'm really good at. But, so I guess Brian Pillman's to blame.
So, that is it for this episode. Please support the Patreon, the Pro Wrestling Tees store. I know we haven't put anything on Patreon for a minute, but, we're trying. Jake, Tyler, you guys got anything?
Yes, please let us know what things you would like to see on Patreon. I am in the midst of procuring some more edibles, so maybe we can do a high pro wrestling history, and maybe that would be on top of a drunk pro wrestling history. I want to do a lot of drugs and depressants and stimulants for you guys. Also, if you want to send me any drugs, we need to get a P.O. box. But other than that, Jake, what do you got?
Well, I think shipping drugs through the federal mail is illegal, so I will go ahead and say that aloud. But I'm all for doing some high on professional wrestling if it's better than some of the drunk wrestling that you've been giving me. So, just make sure you leave a review. Sorry it's been a little slow to get stuff back on this timeline and Patreon. To quote the greatest quarterback of all time, look, I'm 42 years old, man. I got a lot of shit going on. So I moved back to Charlotte. So I'm sorry. Leaving a review to give some sort of support for this podcast would be much greatly appreciated. So thank you.
All right. I had a catchphrase, right?
Bazinga.
Who cares?